Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. For 12 years, Gene suffered from an inexplicable nightmare that tormented him endlessly. This dream led him to a place filled with vile monsters. He had already realized one thing: if he died there, he would simply wake up from the dream. Nevertheless, he had grown accustomed to this nightmare, and now knew he could endure the pain of death. But deep down, he knew that sleep was even more painful for him than death. Because of this, he could never get a good night's sleep and was terribly tired. To avoid death in this endless, torturous dream, he forced himself to learn everything he could. He trained tirelessly to master survival skills. To this end, the protagonist developed skills related to weapon mastery and combat. But even so, the fundamental problem remained: it was still a dream. Indeed, even doctors couldn't help him get rid of the nightmares. However, they suggested he find something he truly enjoyed. The protagonist wanted nothing more than to get at least one good night's sleep. Suddenly, he froze in confusion as his nose began to bleed. The scene suddenly changed to a blue sky, and for the first time, Gene felt a sense of lightness in his body. Yuden, waking up in the middle of the forest, realized that this was the same nightmare world in which he had suffered for 12 years. Hearing a loud rustling sound, the boy immediately focused. A many-eyed reptilian beast had already found him. The creature watched him with predatory interest, ready to strike. He quickly judged that, weakened by blood loss, he might truly die for good now. With no body left in reality, another death here could be final. That possibility forced him to think differently about every move. He accepted that there was no other world waiting for him anymore. From that moment on, he decided this place was his reality. Because he knew this realm and its monsters better than anyone should, he immediately focused on survival. His first instinct was to avoid a fight and head for a brighter area the monsters disliked. But even as he made that plan, something inside him shifted. Drawing his blade stirred a fierce sensation he had never felt so strongly before. Instead of fleeing, he realized he wanted to stand and fight. The beast sensed his intent and moved to attack. He wondered whether his sharpened instincts came from finally sleeping deeply or from inhabiting a younger, stronger body. The monster lunged, and he met it head-on rather than retreating. Its roar crashed over him as it charged to tear him apart. Every part of his body urged him toward battle. For the first time, he chose to trust that instinct and fight to live. He cut through the beast in a single decisive strike and claimed survival with it. Blood sprayed across him, but he remained steady and alive. The monster's body crashed down, already defeated. He stood over the corpse, stunned by how cleanly he had won. Above him, shafts of light marked the safer direction he had planned to reach. He knelt by the carcass, already thinking beyond the kill. Inside the beast, he found a glowing blue essence he recognized from years of nightmare deaths. He took the essence without hesitation. Even up close, the strange organ looked like condensed power. He consumed it, accepting the grotesque act as necessary. With the corpse behind him, he moved on through the forest. He swore that in this dark fantasy world, he would survive no matter what. His next priority was clear. He headed toward the brighter part of the forest where monsters were less active. In the light, he looked calmer and more alive than he ever had in reality. He pressed onward through the trees, following the sunlit path. A month passed, and for the first time in years he was sleeping properly. That peace softened him enough to let him savor the change. After a month in this world, he had fully settled into life here. He had spent that month moving steadily toward light and away from the deepest darkness. Even when the urge to fight rose in him, he kept his priorities under control. He refused to hunt recklessly just for excitement. To gamble his life for fun now seemed absurd. Still, he remained alert enough to notice other predators feeding nearby. Watching them stirred his battle instinct again, though he kept it in check. He only hunted when he needed food, and hunger was beginning to push him now. So he killed another beast cleanly and efficiently for sustenance. He also hunted when there was a chance to gain power. The blue essence hidden inside demon beasts had become a vital resource to him. He believed consuming those essences could let him absorb a beast's abilities. Since he began eating them, adapting to this world had become much easier, and he had discovered something else as well. The body he now inhabited seemed to belong to a third-class mercenary. A badge on his person proved it, and he realized he could read this world's writing. That badge identified his status clearly enough to give him a place in this world's social order. The existence of such a badge led him to a larger conclusion. If ranks and badges existed, then human society had to exist somewhere too. When he finally spotted stronger sunlight ahead, hope surged through him. He slowed, sensing that the forest was changing. Then he noticed a metal device hidden in the ground. It was a trap, which meant humans had definitely been here. That discovery sharpened his thinking immediately. If there was a trap, then people might be living nearby. He rushed toward the bright opening with renewed urgency. At the edge of the forest, he found a solitary house. The sight of a human dwelling filled him with shock and relief. He knocked, trying to announce himself before being mistaken for a threat. Then he opened the door and cautiously called out for anyone inside. The house seemed empty at first, but a book on the table caught his eye. He approached it, sensing it might contain answers he desperately needed. When he opened it, he realized it was a field record about the demon realm itself. That discovery stunned him more than the house had. The book contained detailed explanations of this world's history and terminology. He instantly understood that if he wanted to live here, the book was indispensable. Before he could read further, someone entered behind him. An armed old man confronted him and demanded to know who he was. The stranger made it clear that a wrong answer would get him killed on the spot. Relieved to finally meet another person but aware of the danger, he realized the man suspected him of being a thief. He tried to calm the situation by explaining that he had only entered out of curiosity after finding the isolated house. The old man coldly told him to leave, insisting he wanted nothing to do with him. He outwardly accepted the rejection, though he had no intention of giving up so easily. His hand returned to the book as his desperation overruled caution. He openly asked to borrow it, and promised to pay if necessary. The old man challenged him by asking what he would do if refused. He knew he needed the book to survive, and that need pushed him toward a dangerous choice. He prepared himself to take it by force if he had to. For the sake of survival, he accepted that he might have to become a robber. He drew his blade while the old man leveled a crossbow at him. The old man held his aim without fear, showing he was no helpless recluse. Even so, the younger man judged that he could win if it came to a fight. The old man studied him for a moment and reconsidered. Deciding the intruder was not a real bandit, he lowered the tension and introduced himself as Hector. The younger man seized the opening and gave his own name as Kim Woo-jin. Hector stumbled over the foreign name, so Woo-jin simplified it and asked to be called Jin. Jin realized his original name would be awkward in this world and adapted without protest. Hector refused to lend out the book permanently, but offered a compromise. Jin could stay and read it there. In exchange, Hector asked for help with simple chores, and Jin gratefully accepted. That uneasy first meeting settled into a temporary arrangement at the lonely house. Jin ended up staying with Hector, and despite his rough manner, Hector did not seem cruel. Hector fed him without ceremony, treating him more like a practical guest than an enemy. For Jin, even a bowl of warm soup felt like an almost forgotten luxury. The meal tasted miraculous to him, and he began to see Hector as a rare stroke of luck. By dawn, Hector was already preparing to hunt again. When Jin asked about it, Hector explained he was going to take revenge on the demon beast that had killed his comrade. The thought of that enemy hardened Hector's expression at once. Seeing such a capable man tense up made Jin realize the target had to be exceptionally dangerous. He concluded that the beast Hector sought was no ordinary monster. Whenever Hector was away, Jin devoted himself to reading the field record. The book explained that the world's catastrophe began in the Northern Empire. There, a greedy king reached for the gate of the otherworld, seeking ultimate truth and power. That reckless act unleashed forces far beyond human control. From that moment, disaster spread across the world. Monstrous beings poured through the open gate and overran the land. The record revealed that those powerful demon beasts transformed the entire North into a demon realm within 9 years, forcing human factions to unite against them. Long ago, humanity united under the Church Alliance, and raised a great barrier to keep the demon realm from spreading further. In the present, Jin closes the book after taking in that history. He recognizes that the records are useful, but they leave him with a troubling question. Comparing the text with his own experience, he realizes demon beasts grow stronger the deeper one goes into the demon realm, and weaker near brighter regions. That thought pulls him back to the old hunter's desperate fight for monsters. Jin starts measuring just how deep into the demon realm he himself must have wandered. He remembers roaming that place almost casually, which makes the implication unsettling. As the werewolves close in on Hector, Jin wonders how strong he must be if creatures like these were no threat to him there. Meanwhile, Hector braces himself and prepares to make a last stand. The pack lunges together, trying to overwhelm him before he can fire. He dodges by a hair and buys himself a sliver of space. Using that opening, he looses a burst of arrows to slow the charge. The volley disrupts the front line, but it is nowhere near enough to stop the pack. Hector realizes his effort is failing and curses his luck. Then he sees Jin appear, and the sudden arrival stops him cold. Jin steps forward with a sword in hand, calm and already radiating killing intent. Hector urgently tells him to flee, convinced this place is far too dangerous. Instead of retreating, Jin launches straight into the fight. Hector can only watch in stunned disbelief. Jin remains completely composed as he closes the distance. He accelerates with explosive speed, turning defense into an immediate counterattack. He rises above the lead werewolf and takes the initiative before the pack can react. The beast tries to strike upward, but Jin is already in position to finish it. With one clean descending slash, he splits the werewolf apart. The kill lands so decisively that even Hector is left staring at the aftermath. The corpse crashes down in front of the rest of the pack. Their red-furred leader freezes as the front line loses momentum. Hector struggles to process what he just saw. He realizes Jin killed a werewolf in a single stroke, something far beyond what he expected. Still shaken, Hector calls Jin by name. Jean casually asks whether a demon beast like that is even considered strong. Hector is baffled that Jean is asking so lightly about a werewolf. He answers that it is not just strong, but exceptionally dangerous. Jean accepts that answer without emotion. He decides he can hear the rest later and turns his attention to the remaining pack. The werewolves regroup and prepare to rush him together. Jean judges that there are around 40 of them, enough to become a problem if he fights carelessly. So he chooses a smarter approach, kill the apparent second in command and break the pack's morale. His focus sharpens as he picks out the target. He identifies the unusually large wolf at the front as the one he needs. Jean commits to that plan and moves to kill it first. The chosen wolf senses danger too late. Jin's killing intent locks onto it. The beast hesitates, suddenly unsure. That moment of doubt spreads through the line. The nearby wolves notice their leader's hesitation and falter as well. Panic ripples through the pack, and the formation breaks. The red wolf lets out a frightened cry instead of a command. The rest of the werewolves recoil in open fear. Jean lowers his blade and watches them turn away. Hector is stunned that even werewolves famed for bravery have chosen to flee. Jean quietly notes that the old hunter knows how to read a battlefield. But the red wolf suddenly bolts off on its own, abandoning the others. The fight ends, leaving only the quiet homestead behind. Afterward, Hector explains that the werewolf Jean killed carries a bounty of at least 40 gold coins. Jean asks if that amount is truly significant, still unfamiliar with local values. Hector tells him it is enough to live comfortably for 6 or 7 years without working. Jean is shocked that such a weak creature could be worth that much, and immediately realizes what that means. A greedy smile creeps onto his face as a new opportunity opens up before him. He decides that if monsters like this are worth so much, he can simply hunt them whenever he needs money. For the first time, he thinks life in this world may be easier than the brutal 12 years he endured before. Hector then lays out what he can give Jean now: the hide, some provisions in silver, and a pioneer map. He tells Jean to take the map to Pioneer Village, go to the marketplace, and find a man named Jacob. Hector adds that Jacob will buy the hide for a fair price, and Jean is surprised by such generosity. Hector insists it is only proper payment, since Jean killed the beast and also settled a grudge Hector himself carried. He offers his hand in gratitude. Hector thanks Jean for avenging him and hopes they meet again someday. Jean accepts the gesture. He sincerely thanks Hector for everything he has done. Soon after, Jean leaves the old hunter's home behind. Hector watches him go, now carrying the hide and supplies for the road. Jean heads alone through the forest toward the village. Along the way, the red wolf watches him from a distant rock. It remains hidden, observing rather than attacking. The beast seems to be tracking him with purpose. Jean eventually reaches Pioneer Village. He confirms to himself that this is the place Hector marked. At the gate, he notes that the settlement is surprisingly well supplied for a small frontier town. As he enters, the townspeople and rough-looking locals immediately start watching him. Several armed men in particular size him up with open interest. Jean assumes the tension comes from him being an unfamiliar outsider, and notices that everyone is on edge. He reflects that in a world like this, people can be more dangerous than monsters. Following Hector's lead, he heads into a tavern. His arrival draws attention from nearly everyone inside. He ignores the stares and moves straight through the room. At a table, he sets down the hide and his bag in front of a blond man. Declining a drink, he asks if the man knows where to find Jacob. The question reaches another patron nearby. That man identifies himself as Jacob, and Jean immediately thinks he looks like a swindler. Jean says Hector sent him, and that he was told Jacob would buy a werewolf hide. Jacob is shocked, assuming Hector somehow managed to kill a werewolf himself. Jean notices the misunderstanding and decides there is no reason to correct it. But when Jacob inspects the pelt, he realizes it is genuine and is rattled. The tavern crowd starts admiring Hector again, believing the old hunter finally succeeded. Jacob smiles to himself, already seeing a chance to profit. He convinces himself that Hector's success means the hide is his for the taking. Acting on that greed, Jacob's men quietly move to surround Jean. Jean notices and asks what they think they are doing. Jacob drops the pretense and tells him to leave if he wants to live. Jean coldly concludes that Hector trusted a man who had always intended to cheat him. Jacob shamelessly calls it an investment, claiming Hector lived too far away and had cost him money. He says he needs this hide to recover all the losses he has built up. Jin's anger flares, and for a moment, he considers killing Jacob outright. He reins himself in, deciding he cannot kill a man over a hide alone, even while cursing Jacob for it. Before he can act further, someone splashes beer at him to humiliate him. Jacob mocks him and repeats that he should stop trying to be clever and disappear. Jean says nothing, but his patience is gone. He turns away just enough to make them think he is backing down. The gang relaxes and closes in, believing they have already won. Jacob smugly praises what he thinks is Jin's surrender. Then he notices too late that Jean is moving. Jean rips up a heavy table and turns the room itself into a weapon. He calls Jacob's name, forcing the scammer to look up. Jean tells him that if he meant to rob someone from the start, he should have aimed for the neck instead of the back. Jacob realizes too late that he has badly misjudged his target. His men rush in, but Jean has already decided that killing scum like them will not trouble his conscience. One attacker charges screaming, expecting to overwhelm him by force. Jean meets the assault without hesitation, now fully committed to lethal retaliation. He slips past a heavy swing and turns the man's momentum against him. The gang finally understands that Jean is far stronger than he looks. Jean reads their movements in an instant. He cuts through the opening with speed they can barely follow, wounding multiple attackers at once. Another brute tries to crush him with a cleaver from above. Jean evades and lets the blow smash uselessly into the floor. Using the broken footing, he shifts position again. The room erupts into chaos as furniture and bodies are thrown around him. One thug realizes too late that the fight has turned against them. Jin's blade flashes again before anyone can recover. He carves through another attacker in a single decisive stroke. Blood on his face, Jean looks almost completely unfazed. Jacob is horrified, unable to understand where such a monster of a fighter came from. Even while his men fall, he cannot believe someone this strong could be unknown in the area. But panic leaves him no time to think. Another desperate attacker leaps in and is cut down mid-charge. Jean immediately pivots and drives a brutal strike into the next man. That man tries to counter with his bare strength and fails. Jin's blade keeps moving faster than their eyes can track. He finishes the brute with a clean, fatal slash through the torso. The surviving men are left staring at the bodies while Jean stands over them like an executioner. He remains cold and steady, ready to kill again if anyone moves. At last, one of the survivors breaks and screams for everyone to run. The remaining thugs scramble for the exits in blind panic. They crash through the tavern and spill outside, desperate to escape him. Jacob crawls after them and suddenly notices something even worse waiting beyond the fight. He can barely force the words out. The Red Wolf has entered the village, and its appearance terrifies him. Jacob stumbles back toward Jean, no longer threatening, only afraid. The men who tried to rob Jean now cower behind him as if he were their only protection. Jean pauses, puzzled by the beast's sudden arrival here. The Red Wolf barks frantically instead of attacking, as if trying to communicate. Jean recognizes it at last and realizes this is the scout wolf from the pack. A wolf-like monster suddenly recognizes something about the battered young man and freezes in alarm. The young man meets that reaction with contempt, and wonders if the beast came only to die as well. His killing intent makes the creature flinch hard enough to break its aggression. Instead of attacking, the beast collapses into a submissive whimper. It pants nervously in front of him, as if trying to look harmless. The strange monster keeps acting like an obedient dog, while the nearby men watch in disbelief. The onlookers cannot make sense of why a savage beast is suddenly cowering. The young man is equally puzzled and starts suspecting the creature has mistaken him for a master. Seeing the beast's terrified obedience confirms his suspicion. He steps toward the men while the monster stays low, and the balance of power shifts completely in his favor. To test that obedience, he coldly orders the beast to bite. The monster instantly accepts the command. It launches at one of the men without hesitation. The victim realizes too late that the beast has turned on him. The attack becomes instantly fatal. The young man approves, pleased that the creature obeys perfectly. Another thug recoils in horror as the beast moves again. The monster tears through the remaining men with brutal efficiency. One survivor panics and abandons thoughts of revenge, focusing only on escaping alive. The young man reads that fear clearly and judges the man weak enough to beg. As expected, the thug throws himself down and offers total submission in exchange for mercy. Even while begging, the man tells himself revenge can wait until after he survives. Before he can recover, a sword slams down beside him and stops him cold. The blade grazes him just enough to remind him that mercy is not his to control. The young man looms over him, forcing him to face judgment. He remembers the kind of man who apologizes only when cornered. That memory hardens into contempt for people who mistake kindness for weakness. He recalls his old life, when he accepted excuses from a superior who delayed his pay. Back then, he believed the manager's claims about the company's hardship and let the missing wages slide. Because he was soft-hearted, he endured exploitation instead of resisting it. Once he bowed his head, the delayed pay kept getting pushed back further and further. When he finally tried to ask again, the manager answered with violence instead of shame. The man mocked him for daring to complain. Then he twisted the situation, calling the victim selfish while treating him like someone too meek to fight back. Remembering that humiliation, the young man sees the kneeling thug as the same kind of parasite. He turns away from the begging man, carrying with him the lesson that submission only invites more abuse. The thug's fear gives way to a desperate, ugly resolve. He decides to gamble on treachery the moment he sees an opening. He lunges from behind with a hidden blade, trying to kill the young man in one strike. He commits fully, convinced a surprise attack will save him. But the young man senses the betrayal instantly and turns with predatory calm. He intercepts the attack and denounces men who cheat others without remorse. To him, people like this are incapable of genuine regret. The thug realizes too late that he has provoked the wrong target. Meanwhile, The obedient beast proves its loyalty by dropping a pouch of coins at the young man's feet. The spilled gold reveals that the monster has even retrieved the dead man's money for him. He notices the offering and begins to reassess the creature. Seeing how useful and loyal it is, he casually invites it to keep following him. The beast responds by pressing close instead of resisting. It accepts his touch without hostility. For the first time, he treats the monster with something like warmth. He recognizes that the creature is far smarter than it first appeared. He decides they should get along from now on, and claims the beast as his companion. With the fight over, the story shifts toward the city beyond the wilderness. A calmer morning follows the bloodshed. He wakes after a deep sleep in a room where the beast now rests nearby like a household animal. The rest leaves him feeling unexpectedly refreshed. Even the simple morning feels luxurious compared with the misery he once knew. He washes up outside, settling into the reality of survival in this new world. As the water runs off him, the tension of the previous day finally starts to sink in. He admits to himself that he has killed people now, and not just one or two. What unsettles him is not guilt, but the absence of it. He first wonders whether that is because his victims were scum, then rejects that explanation. The truth is darker. Killing them felt the same as hunting monsters, and the sensation was thrilling. He realizes something violent inside him is awakening. That inner change is no longer subtle, and he can feel himself becoming someone else. Even so, he chooses to value survival over fear of what he is turning into. He resolves that this life will be nothing like his old one, and that he will live without humiliation or poverty. Rather than mourn the past, he decides to enjoy the present and seize what this world offers. He heads for the 5th pioneer city with a practical first goal: sell the pelt and turn it into money. He orders the beast to stay hidden nearby, knowing the monster at his side would cause trouble in town. From what he has read, monster bounties are handled through the Order Alliance. He confirms that Pioneer City has a branch and heads there while thinking he should eventually stop calling the beast Mutt. At the Alliance, a sleepy clerk receives him without much interest. He asks if this is the right place to claim a bounty and is told it is. He drops the bundled pelt on the counter, instantly getting the clerk's attention. Then he states plainly that he has come to collect a monster reward. The clerk initially dismisses the bundle as ordinary dog hide and warns him not to joke around there. But a closer look makes the clerk stop himself. He suddenly recognizes the hide as a werewolf pelt. Shaken, he asks whether the young man really hunted it himself. The answer is a calm yes. He is made to wait while the Alliance verifies the claim. When the official returns, he apologizes for the delay and explains that the reward was large enough to require careful confirmation. The pelt is declared genuine, and the bounty is approved. The young man receives a heavy purse and realizes the reward is enough to free him from hardship for years. Seeing that much money in his own hands makes the new world's opportunities finally feel real. The sight of gold excites him in a way entirely different from battle, and he decides money is every bit as intoxicating as violence. Before he can leave, the official hesitantly stops him. The man asks whether he would consider taking another request, because the Alliance has a problem it wants solved. The word request immediately catches his interest. He learns that a dangerous monster has appeared in a nearby quarry and is crippling local operations. Because the workers cannot enter, bloodstone mining has stopped, money has dried up, and the city is sliding toward ruin. The official adds that the creature is said to be even stronger than a werewolf. Even so, he insists he believes the young man can handle it. The young man asks for the monster's name before deciding anything. The answer is Mad Skull. The official raises the stakes by revealing a bounty of 70 gold coins. That name hits the young man immediately because he remembers it from the chronicles. Worse, he remembers facing it before in another loop of experience. Mad Skull's defining trait is its nearly unbreakable skull. Its aggression, toughness, and strength far exceed a werewolf's. He understands at once why the city is desperate, because even he once needed a month and many deaths to bring it down. The official asks whether he thinks he can subdue it. He pauses, weighing the risk against the reward. Then his predatory confidence returns, and he accepts the hunt as his next target. That resolve is framed against the memory of another beheading, a reminder of how completely he now rejects being prey. He remembers the moment he severed his attacker's head. That memory becomes a vow. He swears he will never again let anyone treat him like a pushover. With that settled, his attention shifts to the practical problems still beside him. He wonders what to do with Mutt before heading to the quarry. Soon after, he arrives at the quarry itself. He notes that work has indeed been halted because of Mad Skull. The abandoned mine feels oppressive enough that he decides the job should be finished quickly. As he moves in, someone calls out and stops him. A mercenary group blocks his way and claims priority, saying they arrived first and are preparing to fight the monster. He finds the idea ridiculous, since monster hunting is not something that should have a queue. Their leader quickly softens his tone when he sees the stranger is not easy to bully. Instead of forcing him out, the leader offers cooperation and invites him to join their team. The young man considers that waiting for them to fail would waste time, but fighting them over order would also be pointless. He starts thinking that temporary cooperation may be the most efficient choice. even if it means sharing the reward. Still, a memory of betrayal keeps him cautious. He openly admits that he does not trust people here and asks why they want him specifically when they already have enough men. The mercenary captain answers honestly that he values safety more than pride. He says adding a strong outsider would improve their odds and bluntly states that the young man looks powerful. The young man notices the sudden respect and concludes these people instinctively submit to strength. The captain explains his reasoning. A wolf monster would never follow a weak human. A blonde woman adds that wolf monsters are famously independent and nearly impossible even for the Order Alliance to tame, making this partnership extraordinary. The young man is startled because he had ordered Mutt to stay hidden and did not realize the beast had already exposed itself. Then he figures out exactly why Mutt betrayed the order. The group lured it out with cooked meat. Mutt freezes guiltily with the food still in its mouth. The half-eaten meat drops to the ground. Both men turn toward the fallen food while Mutt braces for judgment. The young man feels his irritation rise, but not for the reason anyone expects. The real offense is that the meat looks far too good to waste. His anger falters as hunger and temptation take over. He suddenly realizes how long it has been since he ate a proper meat dish. Then he remembers the food was on the ground and that Mutt had already bitten it, and his pride rebels. Just as he struggles with that last shred of dignity, a gentle hand picks the meat up for him. The blonde woman kindly offers him an untouched portion if he is hungry. Her simple generosity leaves him momentarily speechless. In that instant, he decides she is someone he can trust. The group heads into the illuminated mine together. He follows them inside, now moving as part of their formation. As he eats, he is overwhelmed by how delicious real cooked meat tastes compared with the monster flesh he once survived on. The blonde woman realizes they have not properly introduced themselves yet. The captain introduces himself as Jonathan of the Black Marlin mercenary group, and the woman gives her name as Claire. The young man almost gives his old name, then stops and chooses to call himself Jean as they welcome him aboard. Jonathan's quiet reaction suggests he has noticed that hesitation and is already thinking about what it means. The mercenary group reaches the chosen battlefield and quickly arranges a trap to kill Mad Skull with nets and spears. Their captain asks Claire to begin her part of the plan, and she agrees without hesitation. Jean notices a strange power gathering around him and realizes something unusual is happening. He sees Claire invoke a glowing force from her book and understands that this is real magic. As the spell takes shape, Jean recognizes it as the kind of magic described in old chronicles. Claire formally calls on divine power to bless the land and support the hunt. Her spell settles over the group, making the captain light and swift enough to move like a feather. The captain treats Claire's enhancement as a familiar advantage and prepares to exploit it. Claire warns that the blessing will only last a few minutes, so the hunt must be decided quickly. With the time limit set, the captain orders everyone to stay ready while he draws the monster in. He rushes out alone, intending to lure Mad Skull straight into the prepared kill zone. Jean notes that the captain has become much faster under the spell and is impressed by magic's practical value. Watching Claire work, Jean starts wondering whether he could learn magic himself. The captain cuts off any distraction and reminds everyone that Mad Skull is almost upon them. He stresses that a single mistake could get the whole team killed, forcing everyone to focus. Jean judges the plan as sensible in theory: trap the beast and overwhelm it with concentrated attacks. Even so, he remains doubtful that such a straightforward strategy will truly work on Mad Skull. The captain sprints ahead and finally draws the monster into the chamber. Seeing the target arrive, he immediately signals the trap team to act. Mad Skull bursts in behind him with terrifying speed, proving the threat is every bit as dangerous as expected. The hunters confirm the monster's arrival and brace themselves for the decisive moment. The nets drop over the charging beast and briefly seem to contain it. On command, the trap team hauls the lines tight to pin it down. For a moment the net closes around Mad Skull's body and head. The captain orders the spear team to strike while the monster is restrained. The spearmen rush in together, trying to finish it before it can recover. Their weapons drive into the trapped beast, but the attack lacks the stopping power they hoped for. Mad Skull roars through the net instead of collapsing under the assault. The men pulling the lines realize too late that the monster is still overpowering them. It surges upright against the net and drags the entire trap team with it. Jean immediately sees the situation turning disastrous. The hunters are being overwhelmed despite their numbers, and the trap is failing in front of him. As men are thrown around and lose control of the ropes, panic starts spreading through the team. Mad Skull tears upward through the restraint and begins breaking free by brute force. Its sheer strength becomes unmistakable as it rips the net apart. The broken trap sends hunters flying across the ground. Freed and enraged, the monster turns its charge toward Claire and the others behind the line. Claire realizes too late that the beast is coming straight for her. Jean moves first, throwing himself into the path before the monster can reach her. He intercepts the charge head-on, taking the impact himself to protect Claire. His boots skid across the ground as he struggles to hold against the force. Even while being driven back, Jean manages to catch and redirect one of the tusks instead of being impaled. He ends up face to face with the monster, close enough to study it under lethal pressure. Claire shouts that he is in mortal danger, but Jean stays committed. He calmly tells her not to worry, showing a confidence that surprises her. Jean reveals that he already knows how to bring down a mad skull. Using both hands, he seizes the tusks and forces the beast's head into a controllable line. Then he slips aside at the last instant, avoiding the full force of the charge. He uses the monster's own momentum against it while keeping himself just outside the killing angle of the tusks. At close range, he draws his blade and prepares to counterattack. The monster swings again, but Jean keeps moving instead of meeting power with power. Even after growing stronger, Jean admits to himself that raw force alone is not enough against this beast. He recognizes that Mad Skull's greatest advantage is its overwhelming physical power. Realizing he relaxed for an instant, Jean corrects himself before that mistake kills him. At that moment, Claire's magic reaches him as well, and he senses a sudden change in his body. Claire refuses to stay out of it, and sends her blessing to support him directly. Jean feels his body become dramatically lighter, and understands that Claire has strengthened him with magic. With that enhancement, he decides he can use his preferred hunting method much more effectively. When the others offer to help, Jean sharply orders them to stay back and leave the fight to him. The captain hesitates, surprised by Jin's authority and confidence. Jean commits to handling the beast alone for the moment. He explains that fighting Mad Skull is actually easier without a crowd getting in the way. As he moves, Jean reduces the hunt to a few simple principles rather than brute struggle. First, he reminds himself that despite its name, Mad Skull is still fundamentally just a pig. That means it can charge fast in a straight line, but changing direction is difficult for it. He decides to exploit that weakness and stop its momentum instead of contesting its strength directly. Jean leads the monster into a collision course with the stone structure around them. The beast plants its hooves too late to turn cleanly. It crashes hard into the wall and rubble, losing speed and balance. Jean sees that Claire's buff is making the chase even harder for the monster and moves to the second step. He recalls that the tusks function like a person's hands, making them central to how the beast attacks and controls space. But because the tusks are too hard to sever with a sword, he abandons any idea of cutting through them. Instead, he chooses the true weak point between them, the nose. His blade slashes across the snout, drawing a scream of pain from the monster. Jean knows that pain in the nose worsens with every movement, making further attacks increasingly difficult for the beast. With the monster destabilized, he launches the finishing sequence. He carves deep into its body while it is still reeling from the first strike. A second cut follows immediately, opening another wound before it can recover. Jean presses the attack because he knows he will not get another clean opportunity like this. Bloodied but focused, he keeps his composure and commits fully to the kill. Back at the entrance, the others suddenly hear the aftermath of the fight from deeper inside. They rush toward the noise, confused by the destruction and worried about Jean. Before they can make sense of the scene, something moves past them. A wolf-like demon beast appears and heads straight toward the battlefield. Claire and the captain freeze, unsure whether this new arrival is another threat. The beast's roar seems to warn them not to interfere with what is happening ahead. They stop and watch as it takes position near Jean rather than attacking him. When they find Jean alive, he explains the result in his own blunt way. He consumed the monster essence, so the Mad Skull is gone. He makes clear that there is no Mad Skull left to fight. What remains is only the carcass, which he dismisses as nothing more than pork now. The mercenaries are stunned that Jean truly brought down the monster by himself. The wolf-like beast sniffs the air around the corpse, acting more like an ally than an enemy. Its behavior confirms that it belongs with Jean, not against him. Then a second Mad Skull appears from the tunnel, revealing the hunt was never as simple as they believed. This new beast roars in fury, ready to charge the exhausted group. The captain realizes there was another Mad Skull all along and orders everyone to prepare for another battle. Claire stops him before the group makes a fatal mistake. She notices that the second Mad Skull is not alone and understands the truth. Two piglets emerge beside it, revealing that the surviving beast is a mother protecting her young. The mother's aggression is defensive rather than murderous, and Claire recognizes the difference. Jean stands calmly beside his wolf companion, watching rather than provoking the mother. The mother gathers her piglets and focuses on escape instead of revenge. Everyone holds their breath as the wounded mother faces them one last time. Then she turns away with her piglets, choosing retreat over another fight. Claire realizes the monsters had intended to raise their young in that abandoned place, and feels guilty about what happened. Jean is simply relieved that the mother left peacefully instead of forcing more bloodshed. That night, the story shifts back to the safety of 5th Pioneer City. The group gathers at a tavern after the hunt. The captain praises everyone for surviving the mission and celebrates the successful capture of the Mad Skull. He eagerly turns the celebration toward the real reward, getting paid. The mercenaries cheer at the promise of money and drink. Claire notices that the payout is far larger than the original 70 gold reward and questions it. The captain proudly takes credit for making a scene and forcing better compensation. He explains that he argued the job had been misreported because there were actually 2 Mad Skulls and piglets involved, so he demanded more. His bluff wins them a huge reward of 110 gold coins, and the team hails him for it. Jean points out that they never actually fought the mother, so the extra payment seems dubious. The captain casually admits that he told a harmless lie to secure the money. The others accept his logic immediately, and treat the deception as part of the job. Jean watches the group and concludes that they are a strange but interesting bunch. The captain abruptly changes the mood again and brings Jean into the center of attention. He announces that he wants to give Jean half of the earnings, arguing that no one has the right to object after Jean saved them all. Jean is caught off guard by the size of the offer. The captain insists that without Jean they would all have died, so the share is deserved, not generous. He adds that the increased reward leaves enough for everyone anyway, making the decision easy for the team. The others happily agree, and the captain revels in both the money and his own performance. Privately, Jean admits that Claire's buff and the team's trap really did help him more than he first wanted to admit. That realization softens his view of the people around him, and he starts thinking they may not be so bad after all. In gratitude, he offers to pay for everyone's drinks, and the tavern erupts into even louder celebration. The mercenaries throw themselves into the feast, determined to drink away the night. Amid the noise, Jean notices Claire quietly leaving the table. When he asks, she tells him she is going out to practice magic. The idea catches Jin's attention immediately. Later, under the moonlight, Claire trains alone with quiet determination. She continues channeling magic even after the exhausting hunt, showing discipline Jean cannot ignore. Watching her, Jean is impressed by her effort and begins to take magic seriously as something worth pursuing. He turns the thought over more carefully, no longer dismissing it as someone else's skill. At last he decides he wants to try learning magic himself. When he asks Claire, she is startled but immediately agrees to teach him. Jean is surprised by how readily she accepts and learns she had already intended to give him something in return. Claire explains that because Jean saved her during the Mad Skull attack, teaching him magic is the least she can do. She also makes it clear that she would never have offered such help to the mercenary group as a whole, but Jean is different in her eyes. The captain tries to shut the idea down by arguing that magic cannot be learned instantly, and that they will leave town in 2 days. Claire counters by proposing the obvious solution: Jean can simply travel with them. The captain theatrically claims that a hunter as great as Jean should remain a lone wolf and not lower himself by joining their band. Jean sees through the act and realizes the captain is already trying to recruit him while pretending not to. So when asked where he is headed next, Jean decides to bend the truth a little and says he plans to go to 4th Pioneer City for a major job. The captain immediately claims he was planning to head there too, opening the door for Jean to join them naturally. Jean awkwardly asks to come along under the excuse that he can study magic on the road, and both Claire and the captain instantly recognize how transparent the lie is. Even so, the captain embraces the coincidence and happily welcomes Jean as a powerful new ally for the journey ahead. With that unspoken agreement, Jean gains companions, a magic teacher, and a new destination, 4th Pioneer City. A caravan pushes through the forest on the back of a massive demon beast used as transport. The travelers are riding a Tarask, one of the rare demon beasts humans have successfully domesticated for hauling loads. Jean recognizes the creature from his records and realizes people here use it in place of horses because of its enormous carrying capacity. With the route still long, the group is urged onward and the journey continues. That night, Jean sits under the moon trying to learn something entirely new to him: magic. He reflects that learning is difficult not just because of effort, but because progress often demands endless repetition. Claire keeps drilling him through the same exercise, reminding him that real growth comes slowly. Jean admits the stagnation is painful, but he endures it anyway. He draws on the patience forged by years of hardship and keeps going despite the frustration. The 12 brutal years he survived in the demon realm have made him unusually resistant to this kind of suffering. So he remains seated in the dark, repeating the exercise without giving up. At last he catches a faint trace of something and realizes the repetition is finally paying off. Jean understands that this kind of persistence is exactly what he already knows best. Claire excitedly confirms that he has successfully sensed magic for the first time, and Jean realizes the strange presence was mana. Even with the breakthrough, he notes it took him 10 full days just to feel mana at all. Claire admits that is very slow, but reassures him that simply sensing mana at all is still a major step. Without wasting time, she moves him to the second stage of training. She prepares a glowing magical liquid for the next lesson. Then she abruptly tells Jean to remove his clothes so she can work directly on his body. The request catches him completely off guard. A tense pause follows as he tries to understand what she means. Claire begins using the liquid anyway, leaving Jean confused about what exactly she is doing. She explains that she is creating a path on his body so she can inject mana into him from the outside. Once the magic formation is complete, she tells him she will infuse him with mana and that he must focus on the sensation. Jean agrees and braces himself. Claire activates the formation and starts channeling mana into him. The mana floods through Jin's body with overwhelming intensity. He immediately feels that this is nothing like the faint mana he sensed before. Deep inside himself, he feels a dense current moving through him like something thicker than blood. When Claire asks, he confirms that he can clearly feel mana flowing through his body. Satisfied, Claire tells him he has now taken the first true step toward using magic and begins explaining the system. She lays out the 3 stages of magic: sensing mana, containing it within the body, and then using it to cast spells. Since he has cleared the first stage, she now focuses on teaching him how to hold mana inside himself. Claire guides the mana toward his heart and tells him to imagine building an internal vessel to store it. Jean concentrates on preparing his body to become that container. Claire begins the real test of forcing that container into existence. The mana surges harder through the formation on his back as the process intensifies. Inside Jean, Claire suddenly glimpses something monstrous taking shape in his inner world. What she sees is not a normal mental landscape but a grotesque insect-like presence. The thing appears hunched and predatory, radiating corruption. Its body looks less like a human soul and more like a demon beast. Then its many red eyes open, confirming the vision is something deeply unnatural. Claire is shaken by the ominous feeling and immediately fears what this means. She recoils as the mana around Jean turns dangerous. The flow spirals out of control and starts dragging her in. Claire realizes in horror that Jean is absorbing her mana instead of merely receiving guidance, and that he could drain her dry. Before she can recover, something lashes out at her from behind. A red wolf leaps in and knocks Claire away from Jean, breaking the dangerous contact. Claire recognizes the beast as a red wolf and is stunned that it intervened to protect her. The wolf stands between her and Jean, growling defensively. Claire realizes the beast stepped in because it sensed she was in danger. Jean rushes to her side, alarmed by how shaken she is. He checks on Claire first, more concerned about her condition than his own. Still rattled, Claire reveals that what she saw inside him was an inner world. She explains that an inner world is the visible form of a person's power and nature. Its shape changes depending on the life that person has lived. What disturbs her is that Jin's inner world contains something far too ominous to ignore. She asks him to answer honestly before she draws any conclusion. Claire directly asks whether he has ever eaten an inner core from a demon beast. Jean repeats the term, not recognizing it by that name. When she clarifies that she means demon beast essence, he calmly admits that he has eaten it before. Claire is horrified and demands to know when he started and how many he consumed. Jean matter-of-factly explains that he began eating them while hunting demon beasts and has done so constantly for about 10 years, likely consuming thousands, or even tens of thousands. His casual answer only makes Claire explode, because to her this is a catastrophic revelation. She begins explaining the danger of what happens when a human eats inner cores. According to everything she knows, people who do that either die or become demon beasts themselves. As she says it, Jin's eye flashes red, hinting that the warning may not be theoretical in his case. Claire identifies the corrupt force involved as karma, the same as retribution. Karma is the foul energy of the demonic realm, and creatures that absorb it develop bizarre powers. A monster core is the nucleus formed when that karma accumulates inside a body. The next day the group continues traveling, but Claire remains troubled by what she learned. What keeps bothering her is the possibility of the Dark Priest. She recalls that when the otherworldly gate opened and karma flooded the world, some humans began worshipping monsters that absorbed it, and called them angels. Those fanatics were tied to a sinister cult built around that corruption. They ate monster cores and even offered human sacrifices to monsters, becoming known as madmen. Jin's confession that he has consumed monster cores for years now echoes in her mind. For a moment she wonders whether Jin could somehow be one of those dark priests. She rejects that conclusion because he was too open about what he had done, and even let her see his inner world, which a true cultist would never do. But that only makes him harder to understand, because his behavior still defies everything she knows. While Claire broods, Jean casually kills another monster on the road with the same brutal efficiency as always. Watching him, she cannot understand why anyone would ever decide to eat something so revolting in the first place. She concludes that Jean is an enigma, while the truth is simply that he copied what he saw other monsters doing. Claire sternly orders him to stop eating monster cores from now on, warning that he has only survived by luck so far. Jean privately questions her certainty, because he is living proof that the rules she cites may not fully apply. He starts wondering whether his numbness after killing and his constant urge to fight might be connected to those cores after all. The red glow in his eye suggests that possibility is already affecting him. He gives Claire a vague promise to try stopping, and she immediately makes clear that trying is not enough. She warns that if he keeps eating them, he risks not only his life but also his future as a magic user. That threat finally gets Jin's full attention, because losing magic matters deeply to him. Claire explains that in his current condition true mana manifestation will be difficult. Still, she says he should at least be able to use a lesser discipline called mana arts. Jean latches onto that new term at once. Their journey brings them to the fourth pioneer city. The city is crowded with armed people gathered around a public posting under a protective barrier. Jean notices the unusually large number of mercenaries and realizes something major is happening. Claire points out that the operation is important enough to be overseen by a holy knight. The knight in charge is introduced as Holy Knight Raymond. Raymond notices Jean from a distance and immediately takes interest. At a glance, Raymond senses that Jean carries an aura far beyond that of an ordinary mercenary. When Jean asks why so many people would gather even under a holy knight, he learns the request comes from the Golden Bug. Jean first assumes Golden Bug must be some kind of insect monster, exposing how little he knows about the world outside hunting. Claire can only stare at how ignorant he is of basic common knowledge. The red-haired mercenary explains that the Golden Bug was a legendary businessman and one of the richest men alive. He adds that the tycoon died suddenly not long ago. Jean immediately wonders whether the man was murdered, but the answer is only rumor and uncertainty. Even so, the reason for the gathering becomes clear. The dead tycoon's wealth still has to be moved. Because the Golden Bug left 2 heirs, someone must transport their inheritance through the barrier. The job is to escort an enormous fortune. Jean understands at once why such a lucrative request has drawn a crowd. Then the Black Marlin mercenary group is called forward for selection. Their leader is thrilled, treating this as the group's big chance, and drags Jean along. He proudly introduces Jean as the group's strongest fighter, boasting that he captured a Mazcull and tamed a werewolf. The crowd recognizes Jean by a violent rumor and starts calling him the Head Crusher. Jean is baffled by the nickname, while his companion tells him to endure it because the reputation helps. Raymond watches the exchange in silence, still studying Jean. The Black Marlin group is awarded the contract for 100 gold coins and ordered to depart at sunrise. The mercenary leader can barely contain his excitement at being paid so much just to move cargo. He explains to Jean that such fees are split between actual labor and the reputation value a famous fighter brings. That is why Jin's new notoriety earned them such a favorable rate. He finally explains that Head Crusher refers to Jin's habit of smashing the heads of the monsters he fights. Jean thinks the nickname is awful, but he does not deny that it fits. Even so, he sees the money and fame as useful rather than embarrassing. In his mind, this success is only valuable because it can help him get closer to learning mana arts. That night, the mercenaries settle into their quarters before departure. Elsewhere, a brutal arena fight rages as men cheer for blood and demand that the loser be finished off. One fighter crushes his opponent with a savage punch while the crowd roars. Claire worries that entering such an arena could be dangerous for Jean. Jean answers that danger is acceptable if it lets him attract the attention of people who know mana arts. He recalls a line from the Chronicles that holy knights are drawn to strength when they see it. If a holy knight acknowledges someone's power, that person can receive favorable treatment. Jean decides that earning such recognition is well within his ability. He enters the arena intending to use public combat as bait to pull Raymond's attention toward him. His first opponent rushes him, expecting an easy win. Jean calmly slips past the attack and takes control of the exchange. He counters with a clean strike that breaks the man's face open. Without hesitation, he follows by seizing the opponent's head. Then he drives the man into the ground with crushing force. The crowd erupts, delighted that the Head Crusher is living up to his name, and another challenger immediately steps forward. From above, Raymond watches closely, and Jean realizes he has succeeded in drawing the Holy Knight's eyes to him. But Jean knows attention alone is not enough, so he raises the stakes and starts treating the arena as the true beginning of his plan. To make Raymond take him seriously, he decides he must defeat one fighter after another in overwhelming fashion. He keeps smashing through opponents, piling up victories to make himself impossible to ignore. As Raymond watches, Jean is certain the knight will start wondering who this unknown mercenary really is. Jean imagines that once he has beaten enough men, the Holy Knight will be forced to respond. He bets that a real knight would test such a fighter personally rather than overlook him. Exactly as Jean hoped, Raymond orders his own apprentice, Rex, to fight him. Rex is offended at being told to face a mere mercenary, but the order stands. Jean recognizes that this is the moment his real objective begins. He accepts Rex's challenge, convinced this confrontation is the opening move in negotiating his way into learning mana arts. Rex stares back in surprise, realizing the mercenary before him may be far more serious than expected. At night in the mercenary dormitory, a tense gathering forms around an unexpected challenge. A blonde woman falls silent as the confrontation takes an odd turn. A red-haired onlooker is equally thrown off by the mercenary's reaction. The surrounding mercenaries can only stare, unsure why the duel has stalled. The red-haired Holy Knight apprentice angrily demands to know why Jean keeps refusing to fight. While the apprentice fumes, the white-haired Holy Knight remains calm and studies Jean instead. The white-haired knight first checks whether Jean is avoiding the duel because he is injured. Jean casually assures him that he is perfectly fine. That answer only sharpens the question of why he still refuses the duel. Jean explains that as a mercenary, he fights for profit, not honor, so facing a Holy Knight apprentice should come with a price. He proposes turning the duel into a wager. The white-haired knight points out that a proper bet requires both sides to want something from each other. Jean answers that even if his reputation means little to them, his wealth certainly should not. To prove it, he drops a heavy bag of gold in front of them. The crowd is scandalized that he would treat a holy knight still like gambling. The apprentice takes Jin's attitude as a personal insult. He rejects the money outright, but the white-haired knight stops him before he can end it there. Instead of gold, the white-haired knight offers a different condition. He proposes that neither side will demand compensation for any injuries or damage caused in the fight. For him, freedom from liability is the real prize. Jin immediately accepts, amused, and decides he will name his own reward after the duel. With the terms settled, the two men finally step into position. The apprentice's expression hardens as he prepares to fight seriously. Jin answers with the same cold focus. The crowd erupts, throwing their support behind the apprentice they call Head Crusher and betting heavily on him. Jin's companions worry about the danger, but he tells them not to interfere. He promises with complete confidence that he will win. The apprentice asks how far he should go, and the white-haired knight orders him to hold nothing back. The white-haired knight has already judged Jin as a dangerous opponent. With permission granted, the apprentice releases mana arts and floods his body with golden power. The spectators recognize the technique and rally behind the holy knight. The apprentice launches forward with explosive speed. He closes the distance on Jin almost instantly. Jin realizes at once that this opponent is far faster than the mercenaries he beat before. He also recognizes the attack as a far more refined and powerful force than ordinary brawling. Jin understands that taking a direct hit from this could kill him. Rather than panic, he becomes intrigued by mana arts themselves. He raises his guard at the last possible moment. The apprentice brings down a crushing blow with mana-enhanced force. Even blocked, the impact blasts Jin backward across the arena. Jin wipes blood from his mouth and immediately starts probing for information instead of retreating. He taunts the apprentice by calling him a beast despite his holy knight status, trying to provoke him into overcommitting. The crowd is stunned when Jin begins forcing back the apprentice's signature pressure. The blonde woman can only watch in growing fear for Jin. The white-haired knight stops treating the fight lightly and begins analyzing Jin more carefully. The apprentice resumes his assault, driving Jin back with a barrage of mana-coated strikes. Jin keeps shielding himself and slipping away by narrow margins. Watching this, the white-haired knight senses that something about Jin's behavior is off. He recalls that Jin ended his earlier fights quickly, yet now he is deliberately dragging this one out. That makes him suspect Jin is hiding some purpose behind his passivity. The apprentice roars and commits to an even stronger attack. He condenses his mana into a massive descending strike. Jin twists aside at the last instant and lets the blow miss him. The attack smashes into the surroundings instead, and the crowd is amazed by Jin's evasive skill. His allies are even more shocked that he managed to deflect or redirect mana arts with his bare hands. The red-haired observer can hardly believe what he just saw. Jin decides he has learned enough from watching the apprentice's offense. He concludes that he has finished measuring the apprentice's combat power. Now he decides to test the apprentice's toughness instead. Jin suddenly slips inside the apprentice's reach and lands a plain, unenhanced punch. The apprentice is visibly shaken by how much that simple hit hurts. The white-haired knight is startled that such an ordinary blow produced that reaction. He finally realizes Jin was never waiting for an opening at all and had simply been enjoying the fight while gathering data. Jin's grin confirms that he has been in control of the pace the whole time. Even Jin is surprised that the apprentice endured the punch as well as he did, and wonders if mana arts also reinforce durability. The apprentice, battered and sweating, becomes obsessed with finding Jin's limit. Jin openly invites him to find out how many hits he can take. That challenge unsettles the apprentice more than it motivates him. Before the fight can continue, the white-haired knight steps in and calls it over. He declares Jin the winner and promises to honor the wager rather than let the apprentice continue losing. Jin complains that the match was ending just when it was becoming fun. Still, he privately admits that the real objective of the duel was accomplished. The crowd celebrates Jin's victory, and the gamblers who backed him rejoice. Elsewhere that night, the story shifts to the Golden Bug Wolf family mansion. Inside, someone gorges himself so violently that food sprays from his mouth. The two gluttons are identified as Derek and Cedric, the dead patriarch's sons. They rage that the Order Alliance still needs 10 days to get them through the wall despite all the money they paid. Even while complaining, they dismiss the Alliance as useless talkers. One of them worries whether they can survive that long. The answer is grim. They can only keep eating and hope their bodies hold together until then. Their swollen, glowing growths reveal that something unnatural is already consuming them from within. The narrative returns to the white-haired knight reflecting on mana arts training. He defines mana arts as the technique of wielding mana like an extension of the body to reinforce flesh or weapons. Though it is considered a basic skill, true mastery requires perfect control. At its highest level, even these fundamentals can unleash overwhelming destructive power. A demonstration of that power shakes the surroundings. The white-haired knight calmly channels mana through his sword with effortless precision. The apprentice praises Sir Raymond with open admiration. Still basking in hero worship, The apprentice is abruptly ordered to step aside so Jean can train instead. He obeys, though only after putting on a cheerful front. Watching the display, Jean feels he has seen this kind of overwhelming swordsmanship somewhere before. More importantly, he recognizes that this is what real mana arts should look like, far beyond the apprentice's crude imitation. His blunt conclusion is that cutting something that size should not even require a special technique. Sir Raymond tells him to stop overthinking and focus now that he has seen the principle firsthand. He explains that mana should be felt in the body the same way tension swells veins and contracts muscles. The key is to seize the mana already within the muscles and hold it there. Jean realizes this part resembles what Claire once taught him. As he follows the instructions, a strange new current begins to stir inside him. He is startled by the sheer amount of mana suddenly surging through his body. The flow feels calm and weightless, and he recognizes it as Claire's mana lingering within him. That borrowed power begins circulating through him on its own. Sir Raymond tells him to start spending that mana gradually and guide it with movement. Before the lesson can continue, Raymond notices something alarming in Jin's response. Dark purple mana erupts around Jin's sword instead of the expected holy glow. Raymond is stunned that Jin manifests mana arts instantly, then even more stunned by the sinister nature of the result. The energy radiating from Jin feels ominous rather than merely powerful. Raymond recalls that mana arts reflect the user's inner world, making Jin's dark aura deeply unsettling. He begins to wonder what kind of monster Jin is hiding inside himself. Jin, however, is delighted by the weapon taking shape in his hands. He experiments with sweeping attacks, sending violent purple arcs through the air. He notes that his control is poor and the energy cost is high for the output he gets. Even so, he loves how intimidating it looks and immediately wants to test it in a real battle. Soon after, the group travels with a caravan mounted on giant Tarasques. Claire praises Jean for already grasping mana arts and calls his progress extraordinary. Jean asks whether she is alright, because after she empowered him before, part of her mana seemed to remain inside him. Claire is briefly caught off guard by that observation. She brushes it off, saying he saved her life and that lingering mana was simply a small gift in return. Jean suspects it was more significant than she admits, but accepts that her help let him learn quickly. Sir Raymond dismisses the achievement as nothing more than a basic skill and tells Jean not to get complacent. The apprentice adds a petty lecture about gratitude, clearly still bitter over losing the duel. Jean immediately sees through the apprentice's sour attitude. Rather than argue, he decides he can provoke the boy into a rematch later if he wants more entertainment. He does exactly that by smacking the apprentice's horse on the rear. The horse bolts, sending the apprentice into a panic scramble. Raymond apologizes for the apprentice's behavior and promises to keep him under control, while Jean privately laments losing his fun. Their attention is suddenly drawn by furious shouting from the cargo Tarasque carrying the clients. The golden bug sons are in another feeding frenzy, screaming for more food and smashing things when it is delayed. Jean asks about the disturbance, and Raymond tells him not to concern himself. The handlers explain that the clients have been throwing constant tantrums. Since their father died, the brothers have done nothing but gorge themselves, and any interruption sends them into madness. Raymond advises Jean to ignore them because thinking about those men only leads to trouble. But Jean cannot shake the sense that something is deeply wrong. As he watches the food disappear into their mouths, his unease sharpens. The very air around them seems to grow heavier. It feels less like gluttony and more like something inside them is about to break loose. Jean realizes a monster is on the verge of emerging. The moment that thought lands, he snaps to attention. The client Tarasque suddenly convulses and erupts into chaos, throwing its load and passengers into danger. The beast thrashes violently as the entire caravan is rocked by the outburst. Raymond immediately demands a report, and the escorts confirm that the Tarasque carrying the clients has gone completely berserk. Raymond instantly understands that the golden bug sons are at the center of this disaster. He orders the apprentice into action without hesitation. Raymond himself draws on his mana arts and prepares to intervene at full strength. He and the apprentice rush in together, prioritizing the client's safety above all else. Raymond commands the escorts to subdue the Tarasque or kill it if necessary. The escorts launch restraints and weapons at the rampaging beast, but from within the chaos, a grotesque human beast form begins to emerge, wrapped in writhing tendrils. Claire recognizes the horror at once and names it for what it is, an abomination. She explains that an abomination is a human twisted into a beast by the Magiung's karma. Jean is left staring at the revelation that the monster before them was once human. The white-haired holy knight meets the abomination with calm resolve instead of fear. As the monster bears down on the group, he launches himself forward to intercept it. He unleashes divine flame cleave, driving a blazing strike straight through the creature. The attack splits the monster cleanly down the middle and seems decisive. Seeing the holy knight risk himself, the blonde woman cries out for Rex in alarm. Rex tries to follow up, but the monster's severed mass still lashes dangerously around him. He presses in through the chaos, trying to finish what the holy knight started. Instead of dying, the creature's torn pieces scatter and remain active. The abomination begins pulling itself back together, revealing a grotesque regenerative ability. The white-haired knight realizes in shock that the monster regenerated and warns Rex to be careful. Even while reforming, the creature keeps calling for Rex, as if fixated on him. Rex freezes for a moment, caught off guard by the monster's persistence. He immediately understands the situation has turned far worse than expected. Before anyone can adjust, the monster lashes out with a sudden counterattack. Its strike tears through the Holy Knight's arm, maiming him mid-battle. Jean is stunned by how abruptly the tide has turned. The others watch in horror as their strongest defender is crippled. The Holy Knight still tries to move despite the catastrophic wound. He curses the setback, furious that he can no longer protect the field properly. Even injured, he throws himself back at the monster rather than retreat. He answers with Sacred Fire Slash, carving into the abomination with another holy technique. The blow mangles the creature again, but it still refuses to stay down. As he falls into the monster's mass, he keeps calling for Rex, desperate to hold on. He promises Rex that he will save him, showing that protecting Rex matters more to him than his own life. The monster surrounds him with rising tendrils, threatening to swallow him completely. Jean hardens his resolve as he watches the Holy Knight being overwhelmed. He charges straight into the trap to pull the knight out. Jean snatches the Holy Knight free and cuts a path through the closing tendrils. He drags the wounded man clear before the monster can reclaim him. The rescue succeeds, but the Holy Knight is left collapsed and badly injured. Seeing the Holy Knight fall, the bystanders fear they are all about to die. The abomination rises again, its body writhing as if becoming even more unstable. Jean recognizes that this thing is not a normal beast but a human transformed into a monster. That realization makes him wonder whether consuming inner cores could one day turn him into the same kind of horror. He forces that fear aside, deciding that surviving the present battle matters first. Jean commits himself to destroying the abomination before anything else. He darts through its attacks, testing how its body responds while conserving strength. His blade keeps cutting it apart, but the creature's flesh simply flows back together. Jean concludes that the monster's regeneration is effectively endless if nothing changes. He realizes the fight will become a losing war of attrition if he keeps trading cuts for healing. So he shifts from brute force to analysis, searching for a weakness while preserving stamina. He probes the monster at close range, forcing it to reveal more of its structure. After another exchange, he pulls back to reassess rather than overcommit. Frustration builds as no obvious weak point appears. A spear suddenly flies into the battle from the side. Rex and the others rejoin the fight instead of abandoning Jean to handle it alone. Rex openly declares that Jean will not be left to fight by himself. At the same time, the blonde mage begins invoking a support spell through her grimoire. She channels holy magic with the intent to suppress evil rather than destroy it outright. Blue magic spreads across the battlefield and binds the monster's severed flesh. The group quickly realizes the spell is slowing regeneration, so they focus on keeping the pieces from rejoining. Jean hears the others rallying and recognizes that they are truly committing to the fight. He is quietly impressed that they did not break under the abomination's pressure. With the magic in place, the monster's scattered flesh starts falling apart instead of instantly reforming. The abomination reacts by shifting into a darker, more violent energy state. Jean immediately senses that its power has changed again. New human-like faces begin bulging from the monster's body. The transformation escalates, making the creature even more grotesque and unstable. The appearance of faces on its shoulders reveals that multiple people have been fused into it. Someone identifies those faces as the Golden Bug's sons, exposing the monster's origin. The abomination responds by launching a storm of tendrils in every direction. Its attacks spread outward fast enough to threaten the entire group at once. The fighters struggle to keep up as the battlefield becomes saturated with strikes. They realize the monster is reclaiming flesh from its scattered pieces and rebuilding itself again. Jean leaps back into the air to avoid being boxed in by the reforming mass. While evading, he notices a faintly glowing spot buried in the creature's body. He dives toward that point, betting it is the true core he has been searching for. One of the shoulder faces suddenly lunges at him like a separate predator. Jean cuts through the attack and forces his way past it. He lands hard and regains footing before the monster can capitalize. Rex checks on him, and Jean warns that the abomination has grown stronger than before. They suspect the change began when the Golden Bug's sons manifested within it. Jean decides the only path forward is to keep carving away the flesh until the internal core is exposed. Rex steadies him by pointing out that the monster may be stronger, but its patterns are no longer unknown. Jean accepts that support and prepares to escalate in return. He draws on mana arts, planning to overwhelm the monster's regeneration with faster, harsher cuts. With purple power flooding his blade, he charges straight at the abomination. Jean tears through the creature in a rapid flurry, shredding multiple limbs and masses at once. His enhanced strikes keep the flesh from stabilizing long enough to reform. The others shout for the severed parts to be contained before regeneration can resume. The monster's body finally begins to fail under the combined pressure. Its human faces are sliced apart one after another, weakening its cohesion. Even its main maw is cut open and broken down, Jean reaches the exposed blue internal core and drives his attack directly into it. Certain he has found the true weak point, he declares the battle finished. He cleaves through the core, severing the source that held the abomination together. Rex and the others can only watch, exhausted, as the final blow lands. The wounded Holy Knight and the blonde mage witness the monsters collapse from the sidelines. The shattered core breaks into separate pieces and drops to the ground. Those fragments lie inert, no longer feeding the monster's body. The survivors erupt in relief, convinced they have defeated an impossible enemy and earned glory for it. Jean accepts the praise quietly, still more thoughtful than triumphant. Instead of celebrating, he keeps staring at the fallen core fragments. One intact blue core remains near him, drawing his attention. A nearby fighter jokes that even this last piece somehow survived. Hidden among the trees, a masked red-haired woman watches the aftermath in secret. She reflects that the Golden Bug's sons, Derek and Cedric, ended up no different from their father. Her pity quickly turns contemptuous as she condemns them for their useless failure. When she notices Jean taking the core, her interest shifts to him. She wonders who he is and why he would claim the internal core for himself. Jean keeps his expression guarded, giving nothing away to anyone watching. Later, away from the others, he sits alone by a fire with the core in hand. He studies it carefully, already tempted despite knowing the risks. Then he chooses to consume the core anyway. The moment it takes effect, his consciousness is dragged somewhere else. He finds himself inside a memory, looking at a bound man in a dark chamber. Jean realizes he is witnessing someone else's past rather than his own experience. In the memory, the masked red-haired woman coldly tells the captive that the Golden Bug died because he was incompetent. She demands results if he wants to keep living, making clear that failure means death. She treats the captive as an experiment, insisting he prove how special he is. What she truly wants to test is whether he is worthy to stand beside her. She pours a strange blue liquid into his eye against his will. The captive begins transforming in agony as the substance spreads through him. Watching the memory, Jean is horrified by what he is learning. The vision ends violently, throwing him back into his own body. He stumbles away from the fire, overwhelmed by the aftereffects. He collapses to the ground and vomits from the shock of the memory transfer. As he recovers, he recalls that inner cores can sometimes pass on a beast's memories as a side effect. He pieces together that these cores carry not only power but dangerous traces of the beings they came from. From the memory, he concludes that the Golden Bug's sons were turned into monsters after that woman put something in their eyes. He remembers her claim that humans must be affected by karma to become monstrosities and wonders if that liquid was karma itself. That leads him to a far more frightening conclusion about the woman behind the experiment. Jean realizes she may be a dark priest, which explains both the ritual and the corruption. Before he can dwell on it, the blonde woman urges him to leave with the others. She notices how drenched in sweat he is and senses that something is wrong. She directly suspects he may have eaten another inner core. Jean considers telling the truth, but immediately sees how impossible it would sound. He decides that revealing the memory would only create confusion and suspicion, so he dismisses it. For now, he resolves to keep both the memory and the core's side effects secret. From hiding, the masked woman notices his reaction and grows more intrigued. Jean and the blonde woman head back toward the others, trying to resume normalcy. The hidden woman watches them go, now certain Jean is unusual. Back with the group, the survivors gather around Rex's grave for a memorial. The masked woman, still unseen, suspects Jean is concealing something important. Rather than act immediately, she decides to keep observing him. She leaves with the thought that their next meeting will decide whether they become allies or enemies. As the memorial continues, a rocky overlook looms above the camp. The Holy Knight, Rex's companions, and Jean stand together in mourning. The Holy Knight offers a prayer to Ye, the god of harmony, over Rex's grave. He honors Rex as a man braver than anyone and wholly devoted to peace. He asks the god to watch over Rex so that his sacrifice will not be meaningless. Jean reflects that he barely knew Rex, yet his death still feels tragically premature. The Holy Knight suddenly notices something above them and breaks from the prayer. He urgently warns the others that something has appeared. A red wolf reveals itself on the cliff, stunning the group. The beast stands over them like an omen, radiating a presence that commands attention. Instead of preparing to fight, the Holy Knight drops to one knee in reverence. When Jean questions the reaction, the Holy Knight explains that he is giving thanks to Ye. He says the red wolf is the closest companion of Ye, the god his cult worships. To him, the wolf's appearance at this moment is not a threat, but a sign that Ye is offering comfort. When the young man casually calls the feared red wolf his own mutt, the white-haired cultist rejects the claim as impossible and treats the beast as an untamable demonic creature. Realizing words alone will not convince him, the young man turns to the wolf directly. He orders the wolf to stop fooling around and come to him. The red wolf immediately reacts to his command. Instead of attacking, it rushes straight toward them with clear intent to obey. The beast comes to a halt before the young man and offers its paw, forcing the cultist to admit the claim was true. Shaken, the cultist struggles to understand how a beast even his cult could not tame would submit to one person. The young man explains it simply. After he killed a werewolf, this red wolf started following him. That answer only deepens the cultist's confusion about what kind of person he is dealing with. Before pressing further, the cultist notices something nearby and turns his attention to it. The sight of a sword left by a pile of stones and the wolf's presence seems to connect to an old memory, or meaning for him. He addresses the young man by name, Jean, and asks for a personal favor. His request is that, if the red wolf has no name, it should be called Rex. He explains first that it is wrong to demean a beast his cult reveres by calling it a mutt. More importantly, he wants the will of someone named Rex, who fought evil to purge demonic realms, to live on through the wolf. He recalls that this Rex held onto his sword until his final moment. With solemn respect, he asks that the red wolf carry on that fallen warrior's legacy under the name Rex. Jean considers the weight of that legacy rather than dismissing the request outright. He checks the wolf's reaction, making sure the decision is acceptable to the beast itself. The wolf gives a quiet sign of agreement. Satisfied, Jean accepts the request. The cultist gratefully confirms that the red wolf will be called Rex, and Jin's agreement earns his sincere thanks. Their solemn exchange is abruptly interrupted by the arrival of someone new. A newcomer speaks with light irony, asking whether he has appeared at an awkward moment. The white-haired cultist is startled into recognizing the visitor as an elder. Jean is taken aback by the title alone, sensing the newcomer's importance. The visitor is revealed to be Bao, an elder of the Third Pioneer City and one of the highest authorities in the region.